Good evening. I'm Butch Coyne. I'm the director of SCU Presents, the Performing Arts Center here at Santa Clara University. SCU Presents Arts for Social Justice is a proud sponsor of Professor Mike Whalen's A Christmas in Tent City. Our sponsorship is one part of an outreach program that utilizes the arts to address the most pressing social justice issues in our community. Our Arts for Social Justice programs are vital for engaging, educating, and entertaining our community while opening a dialogue with diverse populations. One of our core programs is our School Outreach Project, which tours schools with plays based on the books by Francisco Jimenez about his personal journey as a migrant child. Annually, our plays are presented to over 5,000 elementary and high school students with the goal of creating an understanding of this divisive subject and to hopefully motivate them to create a change in our community. I want to thank you for attending this evening, and if you'd like more information on our outreach program, go to scupresents.org. Now please sit back, relax, and enjoy the presentation.
Thank you, Butch, and thank you, SCU Presents, for making tonight possible. Before we begin, I'd like to pause to acknowledge that Santa Clara University sits on the land of the Ohlone and the Muwekma Ohlone people, who trace their ancestry through the missions Dolores, Santa Clara, and San Jose. We remember their connection to this region and give thanks for the opportunity to live, work, learn, and pray on their traditional homeland. Let us take a moment of silence to pay respect to their elders and to all Ohlone people, past and present. Thank you. Good evening. It's my distinct pleasure to welcome all of you here for a wonderful evening, really all inspired by the work of Professor Francisco Jimenez. My name is Mike Whalen. I'm the chair of the communication department here at Santa Clara University, and I'm also a professor of filmmaking. I must say that as a teacher and an active filmmaker, I am blessed, as are many of my colleagues in the arts, that SCU values the creation of art in so many forms, be it dance, music, acting, sculpting, painting, and of course, filmmaking. Following our Jesuit tradition, students and faculty are encouraged to collaborate across disciplines and look for ways to use their creative inspiration to make the world a more humane and just place. And my collaboration with Francisco is one of these examples. As a filmmaker, I'm often asked, why do you make the films that you make? How do you choose your subjects? And it's a simple answer. It's stuff that interests me. It's where I find inspiration with people and stories. And I mean, the writings of Francisco are just a bountiful supply of inspiration for all of us, no matter where we come from, no matter how old we are. And so tonight is hopefully a celebration of that inspiration that we have, and why we're so thankful that Francisco has come into our lives in so many different ways. Our agenda tonight is really simple. First, we're going to watch my short film. It's only 7.5 minutes long, so we'll get to the best part of tonight really quick, because after that, after we watch the film A Christmas in Tent City, we'll have a discussion, and SCU Theater Professor Karina Gutierrez will moderate a discussion with Francisco. And during that time, there'll be plenty of time for you to ask questions during the discussion. And when we come back after the film, Karina will let you know how to do all of that. But now let's get on with the show, and here we go.
It was a winter, a very rainy winter, and we went days and days without work. And other families in that migrant camp were really hurting, just as my family was. And I recall a young couple, coming to our cabin, she was, the woman was expecting, and the gentleman had a little bag of things that they had, a few things they owned, and he was going from cabin to cabin, trying to sell the few things that they owned in order to buy food. And my father says, you know, I'm really sorry, we're broke too. So the gentleman says, well, please, you know, could you just buy something? My mother saw the handkerchief, she said, oh, this is a beautiful handkerchief.
So my father, you know, who wanted to buy it for my mother, you know, that I guess it meant a lot to him, you know, that it was handmade, and he wanted to somehow reward Mom.
So my father said, well, you know, I'm sorry, we can't afford it.
Being that, you know, in our childhood we didn't have much, and what helped is that we didn't expect much, you know, and anything that we got for Christmas, it was great for us, you know, whether it was a little truck or a ball, you know, it was something special, and we didn't expect that much.
During that same Christmas, I was pretty sure that I was going to get the gift that I always wanted, which was a ball of my own. And because in school we used to have, you know, basketballs or kickballs and baseballs, and so I wanted a ball of my own, and so I was pretty sure that I was going to get that ball for that Christmas. The night before Christmas, my mother was waited until we all were asleep to wrap the gifts for us. And of course, being the little sneaky guy that I was, and there was a hole in the blanket that I poked through to see what she was wrapping. I couldn't see exactly what she was wrapping because she sat behind a wooden crate. And then suddenly I saw her tear up because we had a gas lamp, and you could see the light in her face, and then there was like a sheet of sadness came through to her face, and then tears came down to her face. And I didn't, you know, I couldn't figure out why. Next morning, I get very excited to go and get our Christmas gifts, and so I grabbed mine, and I thought it was hard, but I opened it, and it was a bag of candy, and I was very, very dumbfounded, very disappointed. So I look up and I see that my mother was watching me, and she had tears running down her face. And I realized that she was crying because she couldn't give me the gift that I wanted. So then my father, to surprise my mother, he had hidden the handkerchief underneath the mattress, so he pulls it out, and he gives her the handkerchief. And so we were all surprised that he had actually bought the gift from that couple and gave it to my mother for Christmas that day. And my mother was just thought she had received the best gift in the world.
When he gave it to her, you know, she started crying.
When I saw them embraced, then I thought that my gift was okay.
Uh, I think she felt that it was something special, and in some way show the love that he had for her. Yeah.
The true gift was really the love that was expressed by my parents, and the love that my mother exhibited towards me, because it pained her so much not to be able to give me the gift that I wanted. But in reality, she was giving me the gift, the most valuable gift, which is the love of a mother.
Thank you for taking the time to watch that short little film we made a number of years ago now. Actually, it seems like a long time ago. And I would now like to introduce Professor Karina Gutierrez of the Department of Theater and Dance. Dr. Gutierrez's research concentrates on the intersections of politics and performance. Karina, take it away.
Gracias, Michael, for your words, and most importantly, for your work in bringing Dr. Francisco Jimenez, The Christmas Gift, El Regalo de Navidad, to life on film, A Christmas in Tent City. I want to offer a special thanks to you and also to Butch Coyne and the incredible folks at SCU Presents, who make events like these possible and accessible, not just to our SCU community, but to our extended communities. My name is Karina Gutierrez, and I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Theater and Dance at Santa Clara University. And it is truly an honor and a privilege to converse with one of our most treasured SCU faculty, Francisco, this evening. And I've been told to call him Francisco, so I'm going to try to abide by that. But I would be remiss if I did not remind our viewers of Francisco's extraordinary literary and academic achievements. Francisco is most known for the exceptional autobiographical books, which include The Circuit, stories from the life of a migrant child, also in Spanish known as Cajas de Cartón, Breaking Through, or Senderos Fronterizos, Reaching Out, Más Allá de Mí, La Mariposa, and The Christmas Gift, or El Regalo de Navidad. His work has garnered international recognition, including the California Library Association's 10th Annual John and Patricia Beatty Award, the America's Book Award, the Pura Belpre Honor Book Award, and the Tomás Rivera Book Award. The Boston Globe Horn Book Award, including the Reading the World Award and the Carter C. Wilson National Book Award. His work has been published in Chinese, Korean, Japanese, Italian, Persian, and Spanish. So we're all very fortunate to have him present with us today. Additionally, Francisco was selected as a U.S. Professor of the Year by Cassie and the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching in 2002. On behalf of the many folks who are joining us this evening, muchísimas gracias, Profe Jimenez, for your artistry, for your years of service to Santa Clara University, and for joining us this evening. Now, a quick note for all of us joining us as well. I will not be the only one having all of the fun. You will also have the opportunity to speak with Dr. Jimenez by virtue of the chat function in Zoom. We have folks from SCU Presents that are going to be monitoring that for me to make sure that your questions make it to me. To that end, I wanted to begin by asking a few questions about your personal journey, which is so much the central focus of your work. Your personal journey in Mexico and the United States, your venture into literature and in the academy. So as a child, you worked alongside your parents in the fields. How did this impact your life and or your writing career? And was there a specific event that moved you to begin your writing career?
Well, thank you, Karina, for that wonderful introduction. I also want to thank Mike Whalen and Butch Coyne and the Santa Clara Presents and the admissions office at Santa Clara University for making this event possible. It's an honor to be in discussion with you. My experiences as a child informs my personal and professional life. When I was a child, we moved from place to place following the seasonal crops. And so as a child, I yearned for permanence, for a place to call our own. I was tired of moving constantly and missing school. I used to miss the 2.5 months of school every single year. And so where I found a sense of permanence, of stability, was in learning. That whatever I learned in school and whatever I learned on my own, using a little notepad that I used to carry in my shirt pocket, and I would add a different English word every day to improve my vocabulary, because English was my most difficult subject. As a matter of fact, I failed first grade because I didn't know English well enough. So in this very unstable life that we were living, that's where I found stability in learning. So it's not surprising then that I went into education, that I value education. On a professional level, obviously my childhood experiences inform my writing. I write to document part of my family's history, but more importantly, I want to chronicle the lives of many, many families from the past and the present who work very, very hard from sunup to sundown for very low wages, living in poor living conditions. And thanks to their hard and noble work, we can all enjoy our meals every single day. And what sustains these families is a hope and dream of having a better life for their children and their children's children. So these families are an inspiration to me and to my writing.
Thank you for that. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, you speak about the sacrifices that your parents made to ensure that you and your family had access to a better life and to education. And we've talked about this before, but we have another thing in common. So I too am the daughter of farm worker parents. And as an artist and a scholar, I often find myself unable to divorce my story from my work. And I actually gave my father a copy of The Circuit, your first book, in Spanish, Cajas de Cartón. In fact, he and my mother, Maria Luisa and Elias Gutierrez, may be watching. So if they are, buenas tardes, apa, hola, ma. But we were able to have an incredible conversation as a result of his reading this book. And I told him, I gave him a little bit of homework. I said, okay, apa, te voy a dar un poco de tarea. I want you to read this book, and then we're going to discuss it. And if there's maybe 1 or 2 questions that you would like to propose, or you would like to ask the author himself, I would be happy to relay the message. And he did. And so on behalf of Elias Gutierrez, I actually would like to pose the following question for you. And some background, my father has 4 children, all of which have gone through university, all have advanced degrees. And so that sacrifice is really something that I connect with. But he asked, what specifically about your work in the fields prepared you for the rigors of academic life at Santa Clara University and Columbia University, and later as a professor at Santa Clara?
Well, thank you, Mr. Gutierrez, for that very wonderful question. I think that my experiences helped me to learn the value of hard work and to never give up. And so that value of hard work helped me tremendously in college and in graduate school. And equally important was that my mother instilled in us the value of hope and faith. And she would say to us, Panchito, which is my nickname, we should never lose hope, and we should never lose faith, and we should never lose respect for oneself and respect for others. Because if we do lose those values, what do we have left, mijo? A television set. My mother passed away, but at that time we didn't have iPhones. So she would probably say, what do we have left? An iPhone, So those were the values that I learned from my parents. And when I went to Santa Clara University, those values were nourished by the education that I got at Santa Clara. So I was very pleased, and I felt eventually felt very comfortable being at Santa Clara once I got used to the environment.
Well, you mentioned environment, and yet again, so many parallels in our lives. We both claim the Central Valley as one of many homes, and the Central Valley is such a vast landscape, and it's been popularized by so many literary greats, including, John Steinbeck, of which you have received a prestigious John Steinbeck Award. And there are so many, there's so much that goes into describing the Central Valley. And I'm wondering if there are any particular images, sounds, et cetera, that conjures the Central Valley for you now that you are no longer physically there, but is so very much present in your writing.
Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, when I was teaching at Santa Clara, one of the theater department there in your department, they staged a play, The Grapes of Wrath. And so they asked me to join them on the trip. They followed the paths that the Joad family followed in the book. And so, I did so. And on my own, I went to the places where we lived when we were in migrant camps. They are no longer there, but the landscape was there. And I walking through the vineyards, and I recalled as a child thinking that there was some beauty to seeing all the colors of the leaves and the grapes hanging from the vines. And then the surcos, the long rows where we would cut the grapes and spread them out in large butcher thick paper to dry with the sun. And once we finished the row, you could see that it was almost like a green carpet. And then when we were picking cotton, from a distance, we would see the field. I would see the fields, and the cotton looked like a sheet full of white sheet, or like snow. Mm. And then at night, we were living under trees because it was so hot anyway. And so at night, when we would go to bed, we would hear the crickets, sound of crickets. And then I would look up and see the beautiful cluster of stars. So all of those things that I was experiencing on that trip and then on my own helped me to recall the past. I also listen to Mexican music, like música ranchera de Pedro Infante, Jorge Negrete, and all of that music brought memories of my childhood. And I use then those, try to relive those emotions that I was feeling and in writing the circuit. So I thank you, Mr. Gutierrez, for your wonderful question.
Well, and to that end, because I am a little biased being in the theater department, do you consider the Central Valley landscape, a character in your work?
Yeah, I didn't mean to make it a major character in my work, but obviously it is, because I talk about the fields and the hard work. So it is by nature, because I talk about farm working, and by its very nature, it had to be part of the book.
Absolutely. Well, and you also mentioned that your work has been adapted for the stage. And, part of the reason we're here is because of Michael Whelan's fantastic adaptation to film. And so I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit about that process. So Christmas in Tent City is an adaptation of your children's book, The Christmas Gift, or El Regalo de Navidad, published in 2000. And I'm wondering what prompted this film project, and also more specifically, what prompted you to specifically write about Christmas?
Well, Mike, we were obviously we're colleagues, and Mike was interested in making a documentary film on my childhood experiences. And so I felt very honored. And so he came to our home and interviewed me. That's part of the film that you just saw. And then I joined him and his wife, Nicole, to Santa Maria to interview my brother, Roberto, at his home. And then we drove around the fields, the strawberry fields that we used to pick as children. And then we also showed him where Tent City was. Tent City was a migrant camp where we lived in tents. And so he filmed that part. So then he created the film. The illustrations were done by Claire Kotz, who is an artist in Oakland. Mm-hmm. And my editor from Houghton Mifflin asked her if she would do the illustrations for the book. And she read the story and she said, yes, I'd be happy to do so. She called me. We didn't have Zoom at that time. She called me on the phone and she asked me to read the story to her. She said, I want you to read it out loud. And she said, because I want to feel the story. And so after I read it to her, then what she did was to go to a flea market and look for people who she thought could be models for her art. And so she would take photographs, and then from those photographs, she created oil paintings, large oil paintings that are included in the illustrated and in the book that's illustrated. And we have one of her oil paintings hanging in one of our rooms here in my home. So yeah, that was the connection. So Mike artistically took the illustrations and the narration and put those together. And I didn't know that he had done that. And when he showed it to me, I was dumbfounded because it was so beautifully done.
And the artwork is so beautiful. I was speaking to you, it almost reminds me of a contemporary retablo, so to speak, right? And we also had a conversation. I wanted to see if maybe you'd share a little bit about your reaction initially to some of the found objects that the artist took the liberty to include. Was there anything that you were maybe a little a little, how should I say, not confused is not the right word, but perhaps looked at and said, perhaps that's not dramaturgically correct.
Yeah, the shoes, the shoes that she had us wear, or in the illustrations. Obviously, we didn't have those kind of shoes, but that's how she put them in. And she also, her signature is a cat, so she puts in a cat in some of the illustrations. But that's the beauty of art, you know. It's creative, and so you use your own imagination, and you actually, in many cases, improve on the adaptation of the work that you're adopting from.
That's true. And what brought you to write about Christmas specifically?
Well, that story was one that was memorable to me. Just like the other stories in the circuit, those stories were, I remembered them constantly and lived with them. And so I decided that that would be one of the stories that I would write about.
Very nice. And as I mentioned, your work has also been adapted to the stage. What can you tell us about the process of adapting the book to the stage? And was there a specific difference in your involvement from the film adaptation to perhaps a theatrical adaptation?
Yeah. Well, I wasn't that involved in making the film. I was the subject to that film. But in terms of the play, Leo Cortez, a good friend of mine who is a dramatist, who works for the Pacific Conservatory for the Performing Arts in Hancock College. And he read the book and contacted me, and he said, would you mind if I write a play based on your work? And I said, I'd be honored if you did. So he did some drafts, and he would pass them to me, and I would make comments, and eventually we both agreed that it was ready to be performed. So he performed the play at Hancock College in Santa Maria. And then after that, he toured the play to different schools in Central California, and reached many children. Then he also did an adaptation of Breaking Through, which is a sequel to The Circuit, and also a play based on Reaching Out. So when they did the one for Breaking Through, I thought, well, maybe they could perform it at Santa Clara. So thanks to Butch Coyne, he made arrangements with Leo Cortez, and they brought the play and performed it at the Mayer Theater. And then, of course, Santa Clara Presents has been presenting the play. I think this is the third year, or at least 3 years. They alternate between the circuit and then Breaking Through, and it's wonderful. It's nice to see the play, because when children see it, they get very excited, especially if they come from similar backgrounds. And it's wonderful for them to see themselves and their families portrayed on stage. They feel very proud, and my hope is that they also feel that they also feel good about themselves, and to appreciate their native language and heritage, and to value more the hard work that their parents do, so that they can have a better life. And of course, equally important is the importance of education. That education is the best means by which we can improve our lives.
Absolutely.
So I am very blessed that it's been used as film and also as in theater.
How does it feel to see actors embody your childhood on stage?
It's a little, it's a little. I don't know how to. I don't know. I don't know if I have the words to explain the reactions that I have. Obviously, in some scenes, I get very emotional because it takes me back in time, and you know, just like the film. It's every time I see my brother, who unfortunately passed away 4 years ago, you know, I get emotional. I get tears in my eyes, you know, because I miss him.
Of course. Of course.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I have to say that as a first generation scholar and artist, it's so important to read your work. Representation absolutely matters. And one of the things I talked to you about previously, and I have a question surrounding your work and its perception, because your work is not specifically or particularly blatantly political. What I love about your work is that it presents your life through the lens of such a not precocious, but really a very, I want to say it in Spanish, con ternura, you know?
Yeah.
And so I also recognize that we are living through an undeniably politically divisive time. And what do you hope that your work will contribute to our current national dialogue, specifically in regards to immigration, poverty, identity, accessibility to higher education? What do you hope your work will continue to contribute to this dialogue?
My hope is that when people read my work, that they have a different attitude towards immigration and immigrants, because we are a nation of immigrants for the most part, except for the Native Americans and the African Americans who were brought forcefully here as slaves. But for the most part, we are a nation of immigrants, and it pains me deeply when you know, the administration and others criticize the immigrants who are trying to cross the border, in many cases because they risk, they're threatened by, their lives are being threatened, or because their families are dying from hunger. And so, so my hope is that by reading my work, that the reader can become much more understanding and become more compassionate towards immigrants, and to think about their own backgrounds and see that their ancestors were also immigrants who came here basically for the same reason. Mm-hmm. And so by so doing, I'm hoping that then we can create a more humane and inclusive society where no one is left out, and we welcome each other with respect, and we value each other's differences and recognize that our differences is what makes us rich, a rich society. So that's my hope.
Well, you're very much on your way. And I really, like I said, appreciate your words and for portraying this experience with nothing but dignity and respect. Yeah. I have asked many a question, and so I'd actually like to open it up to our greater community that is joining us this evening, and maybe ask you a couple of questions from our audience, if that's okay.
Perfectly.
I have a question here. I would like to know what Dr. Jimenez recommends for individuals wanting to write and record their stories. Where and how can they get started in that process?
Yeah, my suggestion is that they write from the heart. And I'm glad that they're interested in writing their stories, because you know, this, not only their stories, but the stories of their families, because it's those stories if they don't tell their stories or record their stories, they'll be lost.
Mhm.
It's those stories that gives us, each one of us, a sense of who we are.
Mm.
So when you want to write, write from the heart. If it's going to be a memoir, well, obviously do what I did, interview your parents and grandparents and ask them about their childhood and learn about what their lives was like. And then you move into what your experiences were like and compare them to your parents. And I think that's a way of encouraging. That's my suggestion for encouraging to write your own stories. Everyone should write their own stories, because I think when we tell our stories just as we were before this program, and Mike Whalen said, well, my ancestors came from Ireland, and they were poor. And so when we tell our stories and we make those connections, even though we come from different parts of the world, and come here, and our ancestors came here looking for the same thing, for a better life. And when we make connections, we value our similarities and our differences, and by so doing, we can break all those walls that separate us from one another. And we can see ourselves in each other, and we can take comfort, and we can rejoice in the fact that we're all members of the same family. We're all brothers and sisters. We're all sons of the same God.
Thank you. We have on that note, a question from Mert, who asks, how much pressure did you feel when you had to balance school and work while supporting the family?
How did
you feel? Like, what type of pressures did you feel?
It was
trying to balance.
Yes, it was not easy at all. It was not easy. But I liked learning. I was as a child, I was very curious about things. They used to call me el preguntón. And so I knew what hard work was, because I worked in the fields and I saw my parents working hard. So I just applied myself in my studies. It was not easy, as I say, but then I would think about the alternative, and thought about my own parents and their dreams, and I wanted to realize and honor them and honor their hard work. And then faith. Faith was very important for me, and hope, those values that I learned from my mother. So that's what kept me going. But it's not easy. But like anything else, if you put your mind to it, and you reach out for help, and others are willing to help you, we can all overcome our obstacles.
Eso. I have a series of questions from Anya Remy. Did you forgive Rora for taking the coins from you and putting it in the gumball machine? Do you still have the blue notebook? Does Rora still live with you? And is Trampita or Torito okay now?
Yeah, that's a great question. Torito became a teacher. Trampita also became a teacher. And I still have those coins, not those coins that she took, but in one of the presentations I made when the book came out, the librarian who collects coins gave me a 1910 and 1965 pennies.
Wow.
And so I have them, and every time I go to Santa Maria and get together with my family, La Rora, my sister, always says, "You're not still mad at me, are you, Panchito?" And I said, "No, mija, no."
Francisco does not hold a grudge. That's good to know. I have another question from our guests. Did you ever doubt yourself in your academic journey to the extent that you felt that you should give up at any point?
Yes. When I came to Santa Clara University for my first year, I felt really out of place. Everyone around me seemed so much more well prepared, so much more intelligent, and then I felt guilty, knowing that my parents were still struggling economically, and so I began to have doubts about whether I should be at Santa Clara, and had doubts about my own ability to succeed. And whenever I felt that way, that's when I began to write down my recollections of my childhood to give me the courage not to give up. And then in my sophomore year at Santa Clara, there was a crisis at home, and I was ready to leave home. School, to go back home. And one of the Jesuits talked to me and convinced me to stay. He indicated to me that if I sacrificed another 3 years at Santa Clara, that once I would get my degree, I would be able to help my parents even more. And my brother Roberto and my mother insisted that I not leave the university, that they were going to be okay. And so when I was at Santa Clara, I worked at the language lab, and then I used to tutor in Spanish at Bellarmine, the high school nearby. And I also used to correct papers for a Spanish teacher. And so the money that I earned from those jobs, I would buy things that I needed, and then I would send the rest back home. So it was a struggle, but you can do it. Anybody can do it if with help. I would have never been able to do it by myself. I needed help. That's why I titled it the third book, Reaching Out. I reached out for help, and the faculty and the Jesuits reached out to me and helped me succeed at Santa Clara. That's why I have a great appreciation and gratitude for Santa Clara.
And it is indeed a wonderful place to be. We have another question from Ellie Greenfield. Other than your experiences and the lessons you learned as a child, was there a specific author who inspired you to write?
Yes. When I was a sophomore in high school, Mrs. Bell, my English teacher, she was very demanding, but an excellent teacher. And she asked us to write things that we experienced. So I wrote a little story about Trampita, who almost died in one of the migrant camps we lived in. And so after class, she asked me to see her, and I thought, oh boy, I'm in trouble, because every time she would return my papers, they were full of red ink, from corrections. And so she said to me, "Is the story you wrote about, is that a true story?" And I said, "Yes." And she choked up a little bit, and she said, "Well, Francisco, they changed my name. They call me Frankie." He said, if you're able to work if you continue working as hard as you have been, and she said, you will succeed. And then she gave me the novel to read by John Steinbeck, Grapes of Wrath. And when I started reading it, I had to look up a lot of words, because it was I was still struggling with English, but I couldn't put the book down, because for the first time I was able to connect my experience with something I was reading. And the Joad family, who came from Oklahoma and worked as migrants here in California. I said, well, that's my story. That's my family story. So for the first time, I was able to appreciate the power of literature to move hearts and minds. And so Mrs. Bell put a little, you could say, as a seed in my brain that perhaps someday I would be able to write. And then she also indicated that I had writing talent. Said, you have writing talent, Francisco. So that was a turning point for me.
Ves, that's the lesson. Students that are still in K through 12, listen to your language arts teachers. They're helping you. Another question. Oh, well, I actually would really like to know your answer to this as well. What is your favorite Mexican song or canción? Give us your favorite lineup of rancheras.
There's several of them. Mi Tierra, and Volver, Volver, more recent. I love those. But anything by Pedro Infante or Jorge Negrete, I love to listen to those songs. Every time my family, we go to Santa Maria to visit my family there, that's what I play. Música ranchera to get me in spirit.
It gives you the grita. Okay, we have another one from Barbara Harriman. What is your opinion on separating children from their parents for those hoping for a better life by crossing the border? Ones that would be happy to get a job to help us enjoy our lives by working in the field, supporting our restaurant industry, and if given the opportunity, becoming one of our blessed essential health workers.
Yes. Well, it breaks my heart. I think it's so inhumane to do that, to separate children from their families. It's that experience for both sides, for the parents and the children, must be traumatic. I can't imagine the pain that they feel. And so my heart goes out to them. And my hope is that the new administration will end that. Unfortunately, I think, I don't know if they're going to be able to reconnect the children and their families. I hope they can, but.
Let us pray. Let us pray that that is the case. I have another question. I was wondering what your thoughts were on acceptance of multiculturalism in America as opposed to ideas of assimilation and homogeneity.
Mm-hmm. I prefer to use the word acculturation rather than assimilation. I think that that it's perfectly fine, and actually I would suggest that it's the best thing to do for one's own state of mind or peace of mind is to maintain one's own culture while you take in other cultures, and you can make them your own. You don't have to give up your native culture in order to participate in the main culture we call America. You know, so when I give talks to young people in schools, I suggest to them that if they should feel very proud of their own heritage, and if they're bilingual, to maintain their language while they're learning English, and to then embrace both cultures and take the best from both and make them their own. But it's so important because language, as you know, Karina, it communicates culture, and language is who we are. So if our language and our culture are not valued, we feel that as individuals, we are not valued or welcomed. And I think that can be very damaging to young people to do that. And as I said earlier, the more languages you know, and the more cultures you experience, the richer your lives will be, right?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
From Jasmine Tejeda Custodio, a series of questions. What was your reaction when Trampita said he got hit by a bus? Also, What was your reaction when your parents came back from Mexico and saw your new house all fixed up by your brother and yourself? And did you ever find out who told on you and your family and got you sent back to Mexico?
Yeah. Let me start with the last question first. Through the Freedom of Information Act, I was able to get all the documentation from the time we got deported. And I used some of that information for the first chapter in Breaking Through. When we got deported, thanks to Ito, the Japanese sharecropper for whom we picked strawberries, he helped us. He loaned us money and he sponsored us. And we got deported during the winter when there's little or no work. So my father, who couldn't continue working in the fields because of severe back problems, he thought that by going back to Mexico, he would seek some curandera who would cure him. So during that time, Roberto and I had already began to work as janitors since my father couldn't work anymore in the fields. Working 35 hours a week to help our families make ends meet. So when we got deported, my parents decided that we got our papers in order, that Roberto and I would come back by ourselves and live in Bonetti Ranch, which was another where we lived at a migrant camp. And my parents stayed with Trampita and Torito and La Aurora in Mexico. So Trampita was playing ball, I guess, in like a parque, and he got kind of hit by a bus, and and he got my parents scolded him because he said you have to be more careful, but he didn't get hurt. But that's what the question refers to, and there was a third one, right? I forget.
There was your reaction to Trampita getting hit by a bus.
Oh yeah, when I got the letter telling me, I felt really bad and I worried, but it wasn't serious. So.
And what about the reaction? What was your reaction when your parents came back from Mexico and saw?
Oh, they were, yeah. When Roberto, when they were in Mexico, Roberto was very, very skillful with his hands, and every semester he would take a wood shop, so he would make furniture, and so he made a nice counter we were living in a barracks, so he used the counter to separate the kitchen area from from the living area. And so when my parents came and they saw him, they said, "Oh my God, that must have cost you a lot." And he said, "No, Papa. I made it in the wood shop." So they were really happy about that. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, and I see the joy in your face when you retell these stories. For those that may not have come from these experiences, sometimes they can read as rough or as painful, and you have such a beautiful way of crafting a narrative and from pain, creating something so beautiful and lasting. And for the last question for this evening, not everyone is so willing to share some of these painful narratives as necessary as they are to know. And so someone mentioned, my grandfather fled his native country of Mexico to escape starvation. And it seems like there may be some other artists and writers in our midst. So I feel this is an important question to answer in closing. The question is, I try to learn more about his past, but he does not like to share. What tips would you give me to learn more about that history or to get some of these stories?
Who is not
the grandfather? So there are elders in the family that may feel a little hesitant to share some of these painful histories and stories. But as important as they are, how might one go about learning more about one's story when the elders may not be willing to share?
Well, I can give you the answer from a personal experience. When I, before writing the circuit, I interviewed my parents And my older brother Roberto did not want to be interviewed. He said, "Pachito, forget those stories." He said, "They're so painful. Why do you want to think about them?" And I said to him, "Well, Toto," I used to call him Toto. Toto, I said, "It's just not our own story. It's a story of our family and many families." So then, so he agreed then to do that. And when the book came out, and he shared the book with his children, and his children complained to him because they said, "I didn't know that you suffered so much as a child. Now we can appreciate a lot more what you've done for us." And then my brother sent me what I consider the most rewarding thing about my writing. He wrote me a letter and he said, "Panchito, I thank you for writing this book because now I feel liberated."
Oh,
Yeah.
it's
So,
incredible what art can do to the spirit.
yeah. Yeah. So
Well, with that, I once again want to thank you so much for your time, Francisco. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences and of course, your craft. I thank you all so much for joining us and contributing to our conversation. This is just one of many examples of how you can get involved at Santa Clara University, of how we engage not just with the art form, but incredible artists in our communities. And I hope that you'll continue to join us. For those of you that are in university or thinking about university, it's never too early to consider Santa Clara. It is never too late to consider Santa Clara. This is a fantastic place, as you've seen from our distinguished guests. For more information on SCU Presents, you can visit scu.presents.org. You could also visit their Facebook and Instagram pages. Again, thank you so much for joining us. And we hope that through SCU, we can continue to have more and more of these conversations, especially in person when we're able to safely gather. So I wish everyone a safe and restful Thanksgiving holiday. Muchísimas gracias.
gracias a todos ustedes.